All right, here we go, guys. We're on the percent proportion. This is RP.3c. Um, we are going to focus on the learning target today. I can find the percent of a number, also focusing on a learning target of solving percent word problems. So let's go forward. Now, percent proportion. Percent proportion compares part of a quantity to the whole quantity called the base using a percent. So says the percent proportion is, now this is very important, you may want to go ahead and write this down if you do not have this in your notebooks already. This is how we set up our percent proportion. Now, if you remember, all we're working on are equivalent fractions. So just remember, equivalent fractions, 1/2 is the same as 2/4. 2/4 is the same as 4/8. 4/8 is the same as 50 over 100. They're all halves. Okay, so this is what we're really focusing on, is trying to make equivalent fractions. So percent proportion is basically comparing a part to a whole, or the base. Okay, so remember, this is whole. Now, we want to compare this to a percent. A percent is always per 100. We always want to focus on the percent being part of 100. Okay, so this percent, the actual percent is going to be our part, and our 100 is going to be our whole. So we're comparing part to part, whole to whole. So once again, this is part to part and whole to whole. Okay, let's move forward. Now, the first example, what percent of 15 is 9? So the first thing we want to do, this is one of our most basic percent proportion scenarios. What we want to do is set up a percent proportion. So first thing you always do when you're realizing that you're focusing on a percent question, you're going to draw your line, draw your equal sign, draw your second line. Always, always, always place your 100 on the bottom first. This is going to help you set this problem up. Your 100 is your whole. Now I'm asking what percent. Now since I do not know my percent, we can put a question mark right here. I have no idea what the percent is. We always know that percent goes over the 100. So since I don't know, it says what percent, then I need to put a question mark over the 100. That's what we're looking for. So we are looking for the part. Now, it says what percent of $15 is 9? So the first thing I want you to do is think about which one of these two, because I know I have to fill in the part here, and I have to fill in the base or the whole here. I want you to pause the video and figure out which one is the part, which one is the whole. From 15 to $9, which one is the part, which one is the whole? Now, if you said that 15 is the whole and 9 is the part, you are absolutely correct. Now, a common misconception, I don't want you to always think that the part is smaller than the whole. You'll learn more about this in 7th grade, but I want you to focus on this. The part is not always smaller than the whole. So it says, in the question says, what percent of $15? So you're thinking about out of a total of $15. So usually, for the most part, about 90% of the time, the number that comes after the word of is going to be your whole. That's just for the most part. Not always true, but you can always look to, or you can look for the most part to see the number that comes after of is going to be your whole. So out of a total of $15, we know that that is my whole because it is out of a total of $15, is $9. So the 9 has to be my part. So what we want to do now is we want to focus on what we have learned from RP3A, our ratio tables. Now, ask yourself, is there a way that I can go from 15 to 100? Well, not really. There's no whole number that I can multiply to get me from 15 to 100. So you know what that means? We need to scale forward, we need to scale back, or vice versa. So I want you to pause the video, use what you've learned from RP3A to try to see how we can scale forward or scale back to get to our number that we need, our part up here. Okay, so here we go. So we've got 9 over 15, and we're trying to get to something over 100. So let's make a little ratio table. So our 100 is here, right? Now, I know that I have to get from 15 to 100. So I know that I can't get from 15 to 100 right now. So let's scale back. What is something I can divide both 9 and 15 by? Well, if we check our factor list, a factor that is common in 9 and 15 is 3. So let's divide by 3. Whatever I do on the bottom, let's do also on the top. 9 divided by 3 is 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5. Perfect. I can go from 5 to 100. So what do I need to multiply by 5 to get to 100? Because I have to be scaling forward because 100 is larger than 5. So what whole number do I multiply by 5 to give me 100? If you said times 20, you would be absolutely correct. So 5 times 20 gives me 100, and whatever I do on the bottom, I need to also do on the top to remain consistent. So 3 times 20 gives me, you guessed it, 60. So I know that 60% of 15 is 9, or 60% of $15 is $9. So remember to pause the video, go back, just in case if you have missed anything. We're going to try our next example. Okay. Now, try this next example. I want you to pause the video and try to set up your percent proportion. Now, here's what we're focused on. We have to set up our percent proportion by first, step 1, drawing out my lines and my equal sign. I know that 100 always goes on the bottom right, and I know that my percent always goes over 100. So I've got my percent and I've got my 100. It says what number is 30% of 150? Here's that key word we talked about. So most of the time, the number that comes after the word of is going to be our whole. So this is like out of 150. So we know that 150 is my whole. So I need to go from 100 to 150. Now, once again, there's no possible way I can go from 100 to 150 using just a whole number. So let's come up here and make our table. So we have some number here, and we have 150. So making our tables, and this is 30, and this is 100. So I need to be able to scale back so that I can get to 150. So one of the questions students like to always ask is, Mr. Golden, well, how come we can't go from 30 to a number we don't know? How come we have to go from 100 to 150? Well, the reason we do that is because I know these two numbers. I know 100, I know 100 and I know 150. So it's easy for me to go from 100 to 150 because these are two numbers that I know. It's more difficult to go from 30 to a question mark because I don't know this number. So let's go from 100 to 150. Let's scale back. So I have 100. Let's divide 30 and 100 by something or a common factor. So let's divide them both by 10 since they both end in 0. So 30 divided by 10 gives me 3. And 100 divided by 10 gives me 10. So now the goal is, how do I get from 10 to 150? Well, this is perfect because I can get from 10 to 150 by multiplying by 15. So whatever I do on the bottom, I need to also do on the top. So 3 times 15 gives me 45. So I know that 45 is 30% of 150. Now, we're going to do one more example with a word problem, so we're going to skip a few. But if you would like to solve some of the problems, I urge you to go back to your e-class page and solve the rest of the problems that are on this PowerPoint. So let's get past a few of these. Let's get to let's get to these problems. So what I want you to do is I want you to pause and I want you to try to solve these problems on your own. I want you to use what we've learned and I want you to try to solve these problems on your own. Now, I'm getting ready to show the answers, so let's see if you were correct. Here are the answers. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe this answer was incorrect in class. So let's see, what percent of 20 is 4? Let's set this up. Looking for the percent of 20 as 4. So I need to get to 100. So yes, this should have been 20. Because this times 5 gives me 100, so 4 times 5 should give me 20. So this is not 25%, this is 20%. If you got these correct, great. If you missed any of them, just make sure you double check to make sure you have it set up correctly. Alright, now let's take a look at some word problems. So let's look at the first one, and I'm gonna help you do the first one, and then I'm gonna allow for you to do 17 and 18 on your own, and then we're gonna move to the answers. So let's take a look at 16. It says Mallory has $5 in her wallet. If this is 10% of her monthly allowance, then what is her monthly allowance? So no matter what the word problem says, if you know that you're dealing with a percent problem, then I want you to set up your percent proportion. So we always know that 100 goes in the bottom, right? Our percent always goes on the top of the 100. It says Mallory has $5 in her wallet. This is 10% of her monthly allowance. So we have to ask ourselves, is this the whole allowance or is this all of the allowance? Then no, the $5 is not the whole allowance because it's only 10%. So 10% is only part of the allowance. If it were 100% of the allowance, then yes, 5 would be the whole, but it's not asking for 100. It says this is only 10% of her monthly allowance. So we know that 10% is a part, so we know that $5 is also the part. So 5 goes on the top. So now I'm looking for this bottom piece. So now this one makes it very easy because I don't have to scale forward and backward that many times. I just have to do it once. So I just need to go from 10 to 5. So 10 divided by what gives me 5? Well, divided by 2. So 100 divided by 2 gives me 50. So I know that her complete allowance, her monthly allowance is 50. The key to solving these problems is to make sure you have your part and your whole. So go ahead and pause the video and take a look at 17 and 18 and see if you can solve these. Now, let's take a look at our answers. If you solve these correctly, then you should have gotten 77% for number 17 and 96 for number 18. If you guys have any questions, make sure you write them down and bring them to class.